Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about why Donald Trump's floor is as high as ever in 2024. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you're new, and make sure to follow Twitter and join the Discord in the description down below. And so pretty much guys, this is the map that my model currently projects. Donald Trump easily wins the 2024 presidential election with 325 electoral college votes to Joe Biden's 213. This is a model I have constructed over the past couple months, combining my own election model, which uses the RCP aggregate, the swing of the popular vote from 2020 and the incumbent approval rating, and kind of goes through, the two previous election results, the swing and the trend, average change for every single point in a demographic. So, like, basically, for every single point in the popular vote, this is how much the state shifts a certain direction. That also gets factored into the model as well. And so that allows for a very dynamic election model. And on top of that, I also combine my average with this election model, which is from Gold Crown Politics. He was able to get every single state right in 2020. This popular vote is calculated through the candidates' approval ratings, which this needs to be updated very, very soon as we've gotten new approval ratings. But essentially, my results and their results are combined to get the final margins here. And you can see Donald Trump is easily winning this presidential election. Even when you play around with demographic models, you can see Biden really doesn't have any room for error. Biden does slightly worse with black voters by just, let's say, even by, let's say, he loses 5 points with black voters, or no, not D+5, but let's say he loses 5 points, so 77. That already flips Georgia. Hispanics, let's say Biden loses 5 points there, he already flips Arizona. And with white voters, if Trump, gains a point with white voters, that it's over. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania flip. And that's without me even touching, the male and the female vote, college educated voters. I could literally go ahead and just bump this up to 8 points, and he already flips Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona. Bumping up the non-college vote by one single percentage point gives me this victory. Even me decreasing the young vote share by 5 points gives Trump the electoral college. So he has very little room for error. And if we look, Biden barely won the last election by around 41,000 votes across three swing states, which were Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona, despite winning the popular vote by 4.5. Donald Trump is ahead in the aggregate by 2.8% as of right now, and he's never led by this much for this long. Before he overtook the two-way race, back on September, 11th, ever since September 11th, he's actually been taking the lead, and ever since then, he's either been tied or been always above Biden ever since September 11th of last year, which is a very long time for Trump, considering he only led Hillary for a few days after the RNC and never led Biden at all in the aggregate in 2020, even earlier on. And so, combining all those facts, Donald Trump's floor to the White House is very, very, prominent. It's very, very high. You know, Here's the thing, guys. Donald Trump is very well poised to win this election. Before, a lot of Republican pundits said, oh, Donald Trump might be able to win 270, through Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona, and Nebraska second. And now everybody's saying the same thing about Biden. Everybody's now saying, oh, well, Biden could just win Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and barely get 270. Usually the candidate that tends to have a very narrow pathway to the White House tends to be the one that ends up losing the White House. That's just how it is. Usually, when the pundits are saying, oh, a candidate has a certain amount, to get there, they're usually the ones that end up losing. So let's say we get a similar national environment to 2020. Let's say that we get something sort of similar. Texas and Florida are likely, Minnesota, New Hampshire, lean. Let's say that the national environment similar to 2020, around like Biden +3 or something like that, or even Biden +2. If we look at North Carolina, Donald Trump is polling well outside the margin of error in the five-way race. He's polling 7.5 percentage points ahead of Joe Biden. That is well outside the margin of error, and that definitely puts the state of North Carolina in his column. He won it both times, in 2020 and 2016. He's won the state both times. And so, because of that, I firmly believe he probably will not lose North Carolina in a much more competitive scenario. If we look at Georgia, he's well outside the margin of error here. He's leading by 6.4 percentage points as of right now. In the aggregate in 2020, he led on election day by a point and lost it. So I think that puts the state in his column as well. And even a state like Arizona is also outside the margin of error in polling. And Biden was actually ahead in the aggregate and was overestimated by like around half a point or so. And in the 538 aggregate, he was ahead by around, 2.5 points and was overestimated by 2 points. Now Trump's ahead by 5.6%, which is well outside the margin of error of 3.5%. So you can even make the case that he probably wins Arizona. That may be because, Trump gaining with Hispanics by so much, it may offset any trends with the white vote in that state, which is actually what makes the state more Republican. And if we look at Nevada, the lead has actually been increased to 8.8% in Nevada. He's never won this state before. The margin was exactly the same in both elections, which means it did trend to the right, from 2016 to 2020. And even though this is a state he's never won, this is actually his biggest polling lead in all of the swing states, even more than North Carolina, which is pretty crazy. But due to the huge Hispanic population in the state, that may be the reason why it's pushing so hard to the right. You could even make the case that in a competitive scenario, he probably wins Nevada by over 5, but we're going to put it in the lean column for now. And so, just with the states that are outside the margin of error, he is well within winning 270. Now, Minnesota is not even within the margin of error in the polling. New Hampshire is, in fact, outside the margin of error. Maine at large is theoretically leading for Trump in the aggregate. He is technically ahead there by 3 points. So if he could literally just get Maine and the Sun Belt, he wouldn't even need the Rust Belt to win the Electoral College at that point. Nebraska's second. He's leading there by 3. If he wins that, he could win with 269 electoral votes because he'd win it through the House of Representatives. And the state that's actually looking the best for Trump in the polling right now is actually Pennsylvania. If you actually look, he has a 2-point lead in Pennsylvania. Donald Trump leads by 1.2% in the aggregate in Wisconsin and is currently down in the 5-way race aggregate in Michigan. However, it's too close, for it to be a state that could be outside the margin of error. And neither is Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, but Pennsylvania is the state that Trump is leading the best in, and he usually gets underestimated there by, 2 to 3 points. So it could be anywhere from a lean to a likely margin, depending on how big the error is, which I do expect there to be a pretty big polling error this year, in favor of Biden. I think that they're going to fall for the trap that, Democrats got overestimated, or Republicans got overestimated in 2022, which they really didn't because they actually overperformed the national popular vote. It's just the state polls had Republicans overperforming, but that's because a lot of people tend to vote early. And so what happens is when you start voting early in September, you're not going to answer a poll. Why would you go vote and then continue to answer polling data? That doesn't necessarily even make any sense. And so because of that, you see, states like Michigan, where Tudor Dixon was within striking distance of winning it, she lost it by 10. And if you actually look at the polling data from 2022, if you look at September right before early voting, the results, the polls were actually pretty accurate back in September for most races. They were within, a point or two of the actual result. There was like one state where the polling error would have been pretty off, but other than that, all the polls were pretty spot on to what actually happened in September. It's just that when Democrats go vote early, what ends up happening is you see a surge in Republican support in the polling because either late deciders are breaking Republican, but a lot of Democrats who vote early are not going to respond to polling data after they vote. That just doesn't make any logical sense. However, Donald Trump is polling well outside the margin of error in all of these states before anybody even votes. And Biden fell for Trump's trap to accepting a debate before early voting because now Biden can make an impression on voters without a single ballot casted, and that may affect the results in favor of Donald Trump, especially since a lot of voters did regret voting for Biden by mail in 2020, even after the debates. And so at this point, his floor could possibly be 268, maybe 257 if Arizona is not necessarily completely there yet. But based on polling, Donald Trump, even if I were to give him, a 3.5 swing, against him in every single one of these states, he'd still be ahead by a lean margin in all of the states. So That's the thing. And Minnesota's within the margin of error, so is Maine at large. And theoretically, Trump's actually leading there right now. And Wisconsin, Trump's leading there. Michigan, he's leading there. Pennsylvania, he's leading there. Minnesota, he is not. He's leading in Nebraska second, and he is leading in Maine. So the polls right now currently have the race at around 315. And even the aggregate in Washington, funny enough, now that the new polling has come out of Washington, the aggregate's actually under 5 there. So if you were to average out all the polls, Washington would actually be a lean state in polling, and Oregon would actually be likely Democrat. So that also is something interesting to look at this cycle. States like Washington, the polling's been kind of interesting. In New York, New Jersey, Illinois, even, it's been pretty interesting. So those are signs to look out for both campaigns. But overall, Trump's got a really, really great floor for this general election, and he is closer than ever to winning 270 electoral votes. And so if you guys did enjoy this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, make sure to go ahead and follow Twitter and join the Discord in the description down below. And I will see you guys very, very soon.